Hey, welcome back again to the Mad Professor. I'm Dr. John, your local mad professor living in Iraq in my luxury penthouse suite, as you can see. And, well, it looks like I lost my shirt in the stock market. 10% drop in 2 days. This is like the worst stock market crash since the Great Depression. Um, anyway, So, well, what do you expect, right? Everybody who had any brains knew this was going to happen at some point during the Trump presidency. What we didn't know is how fast and how far down it would go. We thought he would just screw things up in a general way, but he's been dedicated. He's been working his fingers to the well, not really working that hard, but he's certainly been putting a lot of energy into this. It's basically destroying the American economy. Has been uh, only second to kissing up to Saudi executioners on the Gulf links. Anyway, so as you all know, Trump announced his massive tariffs. He calls them reciprocal tariffs, and it's really annoying to listen to all these people on the news shows, even on social media, to keep saying reciprocal tariffs. These are not reciprocal tariffs. A reciprocal tariff is when somebody else, some other country, puts a tariff on your products or some other uh, barrier to selling your products in their country, and then you can reciprocate under the rules of GATT or the World Trade Organization or whatever else you're using as a justification. So Trump has this idea. Okay, I can only use reciprocal tariffs. So that's why he calls them reciprocal. These are not reciprocal tariffs. None of these countries have done anything, have raised their tariffs against us. He's spouting out numbers like 75, 64, 50% tariff. None of this is true, right? Most countries at this stage are putting a 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5% tariff on imports from the United States, and generally speaking, I don't know of anybody who's penalizing us. Maybe China is because of the tariffs that Trump put on their products uh, back during his original term in office. Other than that, nobody's put any tariffs on the United States. Tariffs against on U.S. goods being sold abroad are extremely, extremely low. Right? In return, now Trump is creating these massive punitive tariffs, right? Uh, 74% against Bangladesh, 54% against China, right? Now, these are massive. Okay, forget China for a second, okay? We have issues with China. But Bangladesh, right? Since when has Bangladesh done anything against us as a country? Right? The re, so Trump put these tariffs based on the trade surplus that each country had with us, right? Which basically means we bought more products from them than they bought from us, right? But think about it. Why are we buying more products from them? Because we like their products, right? Either because of the quality or maybe because of the price or a combination. We call that value, right? They have a good value for us, so therefore we buy their products. It's like, let's say your wife has a favorite shop she goes to and she buys all this stuff at this shop, and then you're going to go and say, look, you know what? You're spending too much money at this shop. I'm going to put a tax, right? So every time you buy $100 of product at the shop, I'm going to tax you $50 or $60, right? Well, might be a good idea, frankly, But I don't think your wife will put up with that for very long, right? Just a word to the wise, right? You might not want to try that. And when it's the government that's putting the tax on, right, and it's not based on anything other than we happen to buy more stuff from that. Well, why are we buying more stuff? Because, well, probably because in the case of Bangladesh, it's cheap, right? In the case of China, it's cheap, right? Now Vietnam is selling more products to the United States because they're cheap, right? And you know what, Americans like cheap stuff, right? Now maybe that isn't a good thing about Americans, right? All this bitching and moaning before the election. Oh, inflation is at 3%. It's so terrible. I remember in the 80s, inflation was 20%. 3% is nothing. All these people been, oh, my dollar doesn't go. Like, guys, inflation, okay, your houses are worth more. You all have so much more money than people had in the 80s, right? But they don't think about it. All they think about is they want cheap stuff. So they go to Walmart and they buy products from Bangladesh or China or whatever's the cheapest thing. Because you know what? Americans are cheap, right? Let's just put it out there. Americans are cheap, right? They don't like good beef, good chicken, right? That's why we have such trouble with food diseases in the United States because we want to fatten up our cows as quickly as possible. We pump them full of steroids. You know, you go to Europe, they don't allow you to do that. They want to have quality food, quality beef, right? No, Americans, we want to have a plate full of stuffed with a huge steak made with hormones, growth hormone. That's what Americans want. And then you know what? You go to an American uh, uh, drugstore. You know what? I'm always shocked when I go to. I'm an American, but I got to tell. I go to CVS if they're still in business or other drugstores. You know the biggest aisle in the store, the biggest product is shit stuff that makes you poop. Because Americans stuff themselves with cheap food and they get constipated, right? And Americans are obsessed, right? What happens every time there's any kind of there's a storm coming. Oh my God, there's a crisis. Everybody goes to the store and stocks up on toilet paper. Americans. I'm an American. I love my country, but you know what? Americans are anal retentive. We are obsessed with shit food and shit products, right? So anyway, I'm just saying. So that's why we buy from these places. They have a trade surplus from this because obviously Bangladesh is not going to be buying American, luxury products or whatever. They're a poor country. So then Trump, oh, they must be cheating us because they're selling us more stuff than we can sell to them. So I'm going to give them a 74% tariff. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, right? Now everybody says this. Everybody's saying this, and then they're all saying, now finally, I've been saying it for ages, but finally, people are starting to say, you know what? We need to take back the president's ability to impose tariffs arbitrarily, right? Or not. He has the power to impose tariffs because tariffs are Congress's prerogative. Only Congress can impose taxes, and tariffs are a form of tax. It's very explicit in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It says, I'm just going to spitball it right now because I don't have the text right in front of me. I read it out the other day. It says, Congress has the exclusive ability to impose taxes, duties, excises, and imposts, right? They don't say tariffs because they didn't use that language, right? Tariffs are duties on custom goods that are brought into the country, right? And then you have to bring them in, you take them to the customs department, and you pay the tax on the value of those products, right? So when you suddenly increase all these tariffs, the president is doing this. Why? Because over the years, Congress said, well, look, sometimes countries take actions against us, and there has to be a rapid response, right? Or maybe in the case of a war or a military situation, right? So Roosevelt, for example, put uh, duties and tariffs on the sale of oil to Japan back in World War II, right? So this was seen as kind of extension of the War Powers Act, the idea that we have, even though the president, he's the commander in chief, but he cannot declare war. He cannot send troops into a military situation until Congress declares war, right? So Congress, that means the House of Representatives and the Senate, they have to vote on all taxes, which includes all tariffs and also all acts of war, right? You might remember a story about Teddy Roosevelt, the first Roosevelt president that we had, and Congress wouldn't even allow him. He wanted to send his fleet on a trip around the world, and Congress said, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. So Roosevelt kind of established a precedent by saying, well, okay, I don't have enough money to send them around the world. I'll just send them to Japan. And then Congress can bring them back, right? Okay, it's a bit funny now, but literally now you have presidents, and they have done this before, right? Reagan did not ask Congress for permission to invade Grenada, right? Bush did not specifically ask Congress for permission to invade Iraq, right? So we have a situation where presidents can basically start wars all by themselves, but that is only because Congress has given them an emergency ability to do that. So now finally, we're starting to hear some people say, oh, we have to take back this power on Trump over tariffs. Now, I've been saying this for a while, and I'd add, we need to take back his power over the military, right? Because he is not going to stop until he starts a war. He's going to start a war with somebody, somehow. He's going to do something like Hitler did with Poland and create some fake issue. He's already doing, right? He's declaring that Canada should be the 51st state, that he has the right to send troops into Greenland, right? So Congress can say right now, you know what, President Trump, we're taking that authority away. You do not have the authority to send military anywhere unless you have specific appropriation from Congress for that, right? So that's going to be the next discussion. And of course, it's going to be far too late because believe me, Trump will do something to set up some kind of military situation. And people say, what is this? Why is he doing this? Is Trump stupid? Is he really this stupid? And you know what? I don't think Trump is stupid. I mean, he's not smart. I mean, nobody would ever say that Trump is smart. I mean, unless they're trying to kiss his ass or something. But this guy is not smart. He's driven by very, very basic instincts, right? He's foxy. He's sly. He's crafty. I'll give him that, right? But mostly, he just thinks about winning, right? Now, that's not smart because if you're smart, you try to create a situation where everybody benefits. Because if everybody benefits from a situation, then other people are going to keep that situation going, right? It's like, imagine a situation where you're an employer and you have employees and you trust them and you train them and you pay them well. And in return, what are they going to do? They're going to want to keep their jobs, right? So they're going to work hard, right? They're going to be motivated, right? Maybe some of them will be slackers. Okay, you can get rid of them. But most of your workers, if you structure it right, they're going to keep things going because it's in their benefit. But you see, Trump, he thinks of everybody else as like, oh, you're just here to do stuff for me. You're like my slave, right? He hires people to do stuff and then he refuses to pay them. He rips people off every chance he gets, and he's like, yeah, I stole $10,000 from that guy, right? Right? He has people whose only job is to go around and undercut all the contractors, right? Go out to them and say, yeah, we hired you for $120,000, but you know what? We're only going to pay you $80,000. Take it or leave it, right? So this is what to him is winning. But you know what? This is why he's always small potatoes, and everything he does ultimately fails, because that's not sustainable, right? When you're doing that, you have to spend so much energy screwing people over, right? So why does he do it? Well, because that's what he likes. He likes to screw people over. Fundamentally, he's not a very nice guy, and he doesn't like other people, right? You can call that a narcissistic personality disorder or something like that. But this is something I think is very true. I think Trump really hates America, right? He really hates the fact that he lost the election in 2020, right? To the point that if anybody says he lost around him, he's like, oh, you have to get out of my sight. You're out of here, right? The nobody in the Republican Party can admit publicly that he lost the 2020 election, right? He has to believe that he had the biggest crowds, that he had the biggest, even in 2016 when he won. But no, he had to win with the popular vote too, right? Very strange in 2024. He wins both the popular vote and the electoral. Okay, let's not get into that. So he really hate, and my feeling is this is not stupidity. He is getting his revenge on America, right? He doesn't care about these tariff numbers. It's gobbledygook to him. He doesn't understand where these numbers are coming from, right? Somebody gave him a formula. Maybe it was Peter Navarro guy, or maybe Stephen Miller or some other fascist in his White House staff. He'll go to them and say, oh, okay, just give me a set, just give me, and then they came up with this formula, and he's like, well, I like those numbers. Those are good numbers. 74 for Bangladesh, 54 for China, 30 for Europe, and very convenient that Russia doesn't, Iran doesn't get, because of course we don't have it. We probably have a trade surplus with these countries, if anything, right? So there you go. It's just hatred. He just wanted a set of numbers to really screw with people, right? And then what does he do? He goes straight off to play golf. Okay, 4 American soldiers died in Lithuania. He hasn't even. When they asked him, he's like, "Oh, I never heard. Nobody told me that." Right? Um, Now, I wanted to get into this issue of depression because, now uh, the bankers are saying we have a 60% chance of a recession. Now, 60% chance of a recession now this is what I'm adding on, if Trump actually pulls back on or denies these tariffs, which are apparently already going into effect. But if these tariffs go into effect, 100% chance of a recession, if not a depression. And why? Because imagine this situation. You've got 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% tariffs being slapped on what? On consumer goods that are coming into the country, right? So today, when you go to Walmart and you see a nice set of clothes, a pajama or something, it's like $10, right? If you come back next week, you're going to see those pajamas $15, right? Maybe 20, right? And what are you going to do? You're going to be like, and not just the pajama, everything, food, your electricity bill, your gas bill, oil at the gas pump, right? When people suffer a shock, right? What do? When we have shock, we have a psychological reaction to it, right? We we hoard everything. Bring everything in. It's like when your body has a shock, like maybe you have a wound. Your body reacts by trying to preserve the core, right? So all the resources come back into the core. Your blood, your heat, right? You want to keep the core alive because you might lose some fingers, some toes, or even an arm and a leg. You can stay alive, but if you lose your core, you're dead, right? So that's what the body, social body, does, right? There should be a field called economic psychology, right? I'm a sociologist. There is a field of economic sociology, and I'm somewhat of an expert in that field. But economic psychology, because what happens when there's a recession or a depression is like what happened in 1929. Everybody thought they were doing great, and suddenly there's a collapse, right? And suddenly everything changes. People don't have money. So what do? When you're in a situation of uncertainty, you stop doing stuff. You stop, in this case, spending money. You don't buy stuff. You go to the store, you see suddenly all the prices are 20, 30, 40% higher, right? You freeze. You say, I'm not going to buy anything. Well, I mean, partly that's a logical response because maybe next week Trump removes the tariffs and everything goes back to normal. So why buy stuff? So as long as there's uncertainty, people are just not going to buy anything. All right? They'll save their money. And that may seem good for them, but the problem is when they stop buying stuff, those stores start to close. And the people in those stores, right, they lose their jobs. So now you go from a situation where it was just like, okay, we had a bit of a shock with the prices, a price shock, right? But because of our reactions to the price shock, like if we'd just gone on, we could have gone through the crisis. But the problem is people are shocked. So they stop, they freeze. And when you freeze, then things start to fall apart. And typically it's going to be the luxuries, the extremities, right? Clothes. You don't need that many clothes. You can get by on the clothes you have. Car. You can put off buying a new car for years. Housing, right? You can just not move or not buy a new house. I mean, these things will start to decline in value very, very, or a lot of purchasing, consumption of these things will start to decline very, very quickly. But certain things we cannot do without. We have to have some kind of house, well, for the most part. We have to have some kind of energy, right? For heating, primarily, maybe for AC if you live in a very hot area. We have to have food, right? So, food is you can't put off buying food. You got to buy food. You'll stop going to restaurants. You'll stop going to cafes. Starbucks will close down. A lot of restaurant chains will close down. You're going to find a situation where the initial shock creates a ripple effect. And suddenly the economy starts. That's what happened in the Great Depression, right? And you've probably heard people talk about the Snoot-Hartley Act. I forget exactly the name. This was a tariff act passed by Congress in 1929. It was a reaction to the stock market crash. They thought, okay, we'll solve this because the stock market crashed and now businesses are collapsing. So let's put a tariff so everybody has to at least buy, national goods. They have to buy American, and that will revitalize the economy, right? So they thought that would solve the depression. In fact, it made it worse because now everything cost a lot more and people stopped buying even more. And then even more businesses went out of business. And then it wasn't just in the US, it was worldwide. You suddenly had a worldwide depression. So Trump didn't even have a stock market collapse, right? He had no reason for doing this tariff business except it was some crazy idea. Peter Navarro, this guy Peter Navarro, has been feeding into his ear for the last 8 years, right? That's his only economic plan. He's like Trump's special economic advisor, right? So he's been feeding this like feeding the brain worm in Trump's head. JFK Jr. has the brain worm, but Trump may have a brainworm too. So Peter Navarro has been feeding this brainworm. So there you go. You got it. Right? So Trump didn't need a stock market collapse. He's created the stock market collapse with his tariffs. Right? So congratulations, dude. You did it. You destroyed the American economy single-handedly, right? And it wasn't the stock market. It wasn't, we still haven't explained why the stock market crashed in 1929. Right? But we're going to know why people are going to be 50 years from now, they're going to be like, 2025 stock market crash. Wow, that was a doozy, and we all know why it happened, because you had this crazy guy as president who hated America and wanted to destroy America, and the easiest way to do it was just put these huge tariffs in. So, what's the solution? Well, dude, we have the solution. All Congress has to do is cancel all these tariffs. It's not the president's power. He does not have the power to impose any of these tariffs. But you know what? They're scared shitless that if they say boo to Donald Trump, they're going to have redneck, MAGA, racist Nazis chasing them down the streets, right? Which is what happened to Lindsey Graham, right? That's one way to keep the people in line. You got scary followers, right? So now we know the secret of January 6th, 2020, right? Or 2021 rather, because that was when Trump told Congress, I got my peeps. And now he's president again, right? And he's not gonna do anything stupid like let somebody shut him down if he wants to take over the government and have a coup. So we've got a pretty interesting situation right now in the U.S. Right? Congress could, in theory, yeah. I mean, the Constitution gives them the power. They could cancel all these tariffs right now. But all kinds of things can happen. And of course, Trump is just itching to get a war started, so that way he can justify a third term, right? Because then we'd have a real emergency on hand. And hey, we don't need any election, right? Even he stopped criticizing Zelensky for being a dictator, right? Remember, Zelensky didn't want to hold a presidential election, which I think is a big mistake. The United States, we had a presidential election in the middle of every war, right? World War II, 1940, 1944, even in the Civil War, we had a presidential election. But guaranteed Trump's going to use that as an excuse. So I gotta go. But I just wanted to make one more comment about, you might not remember it since every day there's a new craziness coming out of the Trump White House. Remember that Signal meeting about Yemen, and they had their meeting on Signal, which is like a social media platform like WhatsApp or Telegram. You form a group and you invite people in, and then they invited in a journalist by mistake, and it's like, well, dude, the U.S. government, they developed the internet, and they have all of this sophisticated software and hardware for having secret meetings, right? That's all they've been doing. They spend billions of dollars on all this secret stuff, right? So why are they going to this outside, commercial business, right, to set up a talk about incredibly secret things like, oh, when are we attacking, and what equipment are we using, and what are the parameters, and how do we know who's there? Right now we know our target is in place. How do we, they're discussing the most secret things in, it's not an open channel, right? But still, basically a public channel, right? That people, other governments could potentially hack into. Besides the fact that they're also inviting unauthorized people into this chat room by mistake, right? So it's like, how many of spies have they invited in by mistake? Like spies going through Mar-a-Lago in the middle of, well, at any time basically, because they're invited. They pay $200,000. You get to go to Mar-a-Lago and check all the secret documents in the bathroom. Um, so they're saying, why did they do that? They have all these billions of dollars of equipment to hold meetings. And I had this thought. Let's see what you think. Comment below if you like. But I thought this, you know, I bet you 100 to 1 those government channels, communication systems, and chat rooms or whatever don't have emojis. All right, you guys have a good night. Like, subscribe, and please comment below on any craziness you think I've been saying. Gotta go. Bye. Toodaloo.